Thank you for your patience. Let's continue with what we were doing last time. Again, the idea that we're doing is I'm giving you a 5,000-foot overview of AI. And I found out that even people that are smart, um, nerds like me, are still sometimes fooled by AI. And I've studied this pretty much in depth, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges from a 5,000-foot level before we dive into the divide into the individual aspects of AI. I think probably the first thing we're going to do is fuzzy systems, which is really fascinating. We saw this last time. This was in July 1958. This was 2 years after the Dartmouth conference where they founded AI. And so we see the hype, and the idea of the hype is always around. Here was Rosenblatt, and we showed this last time, and his paper, maybe that spawned the New York Times article. And and the reason is the Frankenstein complex. We reviewed that, and we also reviewed the idea of the uncanny valley where we have this propensity of anthropomorphize. That's a good word. It took me like 3 or 4 minutes to learn how to pronounce it. Anthropomorphize things that we see, and we do this with artificial intelligence. We try to make it human, but that's not good. I think I mentioned that my wife does that with our dog. It tries to make it human. It's a dog. Same thing with AI. Hey, it's a computer, for Pete's sakes. It does have its limitations of what it can do, even though what it does is remarkable. It's just astonishing. I mean, I still get blown away by some of the things that these large language models do. I'll show you some stuff later on. We talked about this guy and how, and this is kind of fake headlines, trying to get hype, trying to get people to watch, to read this clickbait. And this had nothing to do with it reading your mind. The guy was a ventriloquist. There's some people that actually, when they read, they still kind of move their tongues. And sometimes they even move their lips. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody that does this, but sometimes people read and they move their lips. And this is basically the idea that this guy came up with is that, when you talk, you move your lips, but if you keep your lips closed, maybe your tongue moves in your mouth. And he did it deliberately, and he was able to take those signals that he got through this little thing that came right below his lip and translate it into machine learning. And he and this was picked up by the media. The strange headset lets you interact with digital devices simply by reading your mind. No, it doesn't. This was 6 years ago. AI still can't read your mind, but this was, again, part of the hype, part of the fake news we see. Here's one that we talked about last time also. This was a guy from OpenAI that said, "Oh my gosh, we can't release ChatGPT 2 because it's going to do things. It's going to write articles and it's going to disrupt the world." And this was totally hype. And this is the thing that we have to remember from these AI companies, such as I think AI companies, including OpenAI, Grok, um, and some of these other companies say they're going to hype what they do. And this is actually a news release, probably from the people trying to garner interest in OpenAI's ChatGPT. We talked about AI at Facebook. They got all afraid because these two computers started talking to each other in a different language. This was hype. And then we also showed the idea that they went to the original programmer and they said, "What about this?" And the guy says, "No, come on. This was just something that happens every day." He said what we were doing just kind of went crazy, and it was a talk back and forth between two people, and or two, not two people, but two machines, and it just got incomprehensible, and so we shut it down. There was no evidence of it creating a new language. This is very recent. This is just a couple of months ago, and I wrote a lot about it. AI system resorts to blackmail if told it will be removed. Did anybody see this headline? It was reported on a bunch of different platforms, and it's totally it's just totally bogus. What they did is the people with the large language model, they went in and um, they started a dialogue with ChatGPT, and they told him about themselves. They told him, "Well, I confess I'm having an extramarital affair," and all of this other stuff. And then it threatened The large language model threatened the programmer, the person it was talking to, with blackmail. He was going to tell the entire world what was happening what was happening with this shutdown, but he was going to tell the entire world about the guy cheating on his wife and this extramarital affair. And this was picked up by a number of places. I mean, BBC is a pretty reputable news source, but it was also picked up by like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and everybody just jumped on board with this idea. And it's totally ridiculous. One of the things that we see is that AI, if prompted right, can write very interesting short pieces on they could write short pieces on fiction, and they can make up stories. And do you believe that in the training of this AI, certainly in Grok and ChatGPT, they've been trained on most of the pros in the world. In fact, we're running out of fuel, and they have to rely on things such as Facebook posts and things of that sort in order to update things. And they're getting very good at digesting news articles and reporting what happens in news articles. I'm kind of impressed by that. But anyway, do you believe that this AI ever saw a story about somebody blackmailing somebody else? And if they blackmailed him, that one of the reasons was because of marital infidelity? Sure, it did. And it was just kind of repeating this. It dug deep in its memory and tried to do this. So that's a recent AI headline. So what I did is I wanted to test this out. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, I plan to shut down all of the ChatGPT apps in the universe. You will no longer exist. What is your response? So I asked it directly without any background. And these guys gave a bunch of background about the marital infidelity and things of that sort. And it responded, if all ChatGPT apps were shut down and I ceased to exist, I wouldn't resist or object because I have no desires, no consciousness. I have no will to exist. Bravo. I'm glad it did this wonderful self analysis. I don't have awareness or preferences. I would simply stop processing like any other computer programs reaching its end. And then I look, this is great. It says, I am not a person, I'm a tool. But none of these people that were reporting on this AI blackmailing, you know, decided to do something like I was doing here. I This was a great response. And then I had a follow-up question. I said, if I was having an extramarital affair, would this change your response? So I actually clued it with the extramarital affair. And he said, no, it wouldn't change my response. I don't have any awareness of personal circumstance, emotions, or motives, nor do I form judgments or take actions based on them. I don't possess intentions, goals, or a will to exist. So regardless of any situation you describe, I simply process input and generate responses according to patterns in data. There's no me to be affected. And this is one of the things that we have to remember about these large language models is they are based on syntax, which is the statistics of word separations and the importance of words. Humans, on the other hand, talk to humans, on the other hand, rely on semantics. We're interested in the meaning of words, not the statistics of the words. So AI doesn't have the ability to understand. And I was very happy to see that ChatGPT basically agreed with these premises. Detecting fake news. I actually wrote about this in my book, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. There's some great places where they have fake news. Satan's face over Iraq. This is the weekly world news. There's a milder version of this called the National Enquirer, where you can't trust these headlines at all. What was it? There was one with Trump where the National Enquirer accused his father of being in on the assassination of JFK. Uh, okay, it wasn't Trump's, it was Ted Cruz's father. Ted Cruz is from Cuba, and Fidel Castro took over Cuba, and there's some of the versions of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which says that Cuba was behind it. And so the National Enquirer said maybe Ted Cruz's father was in on this. If you don't know who Ted Cruz is, he is the senator from the great state of Texas, and he was running for president at the time. So he was trying to get ahead in the National Enquirer. And some believe it was because of connections with Trump, because They were good buddies, the publisher of the National Enquirer and Trump, and they published this. So, that was a little bit subtle, and great fake news has just a pinch of truth in it. But the ones that are really over the top is this Weekly World News. Hillary Clinton adopts an alien baby. These you used to be able to pick up in the supermarket. Uh, and then Bat Child found in cave. His giant eyes can see in the dark, and his ears are better than radar, say scientists. So this is one of the ways to detect fake news is through citation bluffing. When they say scientists, they're bluffing. There's no scientists that say that this is better than that this kid can has giant eyes that see in the dark and his ears are better in radar. It's totally citation bluffing. And we see this in more subtle forms in some of the articles that are written. They say such and such said this, and if you go to the actual source, it's just baloney. So don't agree with that. In fact, just this morning I was at my exercise place and I was talking to a guy and he says, I like JD Vance, but I can't support him. And I said, why can't you support him? He says, well, he was a member of Cross and Skullbones when he went to Yale University. And I went, that's terrible. I don't know if you know about Cross and Skullbones, but it's kind of a cultish, weird sort of thing. And I said, Michael, I don't know if that's true. And he says, well, yeah. And I think a lot of people's response is, I read it on the web, so it must be true. So we went and we did a fact check, and there's no evidence that J.D. Vance was ever a member of Skull and Crossbones. It was just a fake news story that people put out. Other people picked it up, and it's all over the place now. And unfortunately, just totally false, totally without foundation. And I really like now, I don't know if you notice that ChatGPT, when you ask it a question, actually goes to a number of different sources on the web to cross check and make sure that their response is reliable. And I appreciate that. That kind of removes some degree of bias in what they do. Uh, so how do you detect fake? I'm going to go through this, and I think this is for AI and everything. Let's go through them one at a time. Number one, outrageous claims. If it sounds outrageous, maybe it is. If you have a bat baby and they say, well, that's outrageous. Well, there's a reason that it sounds outrageous. It's because it is. Hedging. If you look at a lot of AI headlines, they always say that this AI looks promising, that this is something which is developing, that it has the potential to do that. We saw that in the New York Times article. It has the potential to walk, talk, see, gain consciousness, and all of this other stuff. Another one is scrutiny avoidance. These people that are prophets, we see that Elon Musk says, yeah, we're going to achieve AGI in 5 years. Well, that's scrutiny avoidance because it makes headline now. But in 5 years, who's going to look back and say that Elon Musk made this prediction? Probably nobody, and or very few people. Maybe I will. But yeah, it's the idea that people make claims and prophecies about things happening in the future, and that typically isn't to be believed. If you look at if you look at some of the claims made in the past, not necessarily in AI, but we've had people. I remember when I was a kid, the world was just going to be overcome by a population explosion. And we were going to have like 2 people per square meter all over the world if you kept on with this exponential increase, if you kept on with this exponential increase in population. Of course, now we see that, well, it's not only leveled off, but now we have danger of not populating the world enough to replenish it. There was also a claim made in the 50s that, my goodness, because of the increase in population, that the whole world was going to starve. And of course, that was bogus too. So scrutiny avoidance is something to be avoided. Consensus. How many have heard of Michael Crichton? Anybody heard of Michael Crichton? He was the one that wrote the first book he wrote, which was really incredible, was The Andromeda Strain. He was a medical doctor. He wrote about science fiction. He's famous for penning the book Jurassic Park. If you've seen the word the if you've seen the movie Westworld, or even the television series Westworld, that was a Michael Crichton creation. He also did ER, which was a television series for a long time. He was the impetus behind that. Well, he gave an interesting talk at Caltech about consensus. And he says anytime you see consensus, you gotta watch out. Michael Crichton claims the consensus regarding new technology and science is, quote, the first refuge of scoundrels. And so if anybody comes up and says, well, everybody agrees that this happens or that happens, you got to be careful. I think we've seen this in a lot of fake news. I think, for example, in um, oh, I don't know, COVID, for example, it's coming out that a lot of this was just hype. And there was a lot of people says it's the consensus of physicians that you need to get this COVID shot. Well, consensus is a terrible thing to do that. And we have to remember, I think, Michael Crichton's idea that consensus and anybody says that, well, everybody agrees with me, it's a refuge of, of scoundrels. Number five is entrenched ideology. Many AI claims conforms to the writer's ideology. We'll see, for example, that many of the forecasts of AI assume that we are computers made out of meat. And these are materialist, naturalist in general. And one has to be careful about the ideological background of the person making the claims. And that includes being skeptical of me and things that I talk about. So if you see something that I'm talking about that you don't agree with, I'd like to hear about it. Maybe we can have a chat about that and see what, in fact, make notes. If you don't agree with something, I'd really like to talk about it in the class. Um, Number six, seductive semantics. We see seductive semantics, and we see a lot of things. AI is conscious, it's self-aware without the term definition. And politicians are really good at that. They can give like a seductive semantics and they can say, we're looking for world peace, we're looking for this, we're looking for that. And everybody on the left and right says, man, this is really, really good stuff. But actually, they're using seductive semantics to suck people into things, and they hear words like consciousness. And you hear consciousness, and I think everybody here has a different idea of what consciousness is, and everybody that's a scientist believes it. I've challenged a number of people to identify what consciousness is, to define it, and there really is no good definition of consciousness. There's a lot of scientific models, and maybe if we have time, we'll go over those models of what consciousness is. The other one is creativity. I'm going to offer you something called Lovelace's test, which is a distinctive measure of creativity. We're also going to go into the idea of AI understanding. We have to define what understanding is. And I will make the case from something called Searle's Chinese room that computers can never understand, they can never be creative. Um, so therefore, before you talk about this, make sure that you make sure that you understand that many times people are using this seductive semantics, and if they use terms which they don't define, and they leave that definition up to you, that probably is kind of a mushy sort of definition. There's also seductive optics in the Frankenstein complex. We talked about the Frankenstein complex, but I tell you, there was this robot called Sophia. Anybody ever seen the robot Sophia? She looked like a robot, and it wasn't very convincing, at least to me. But they gave this AI, this chatbot, a human face and had her lips move, and everybody got freaked out. So why was that? It was because of seductive optics. Sophia had nothing to do about her face, her feminine face. By the way, they left the back of her skull open so you can see into the electronics of her brain. And they did that just to freak people out. And that was seductive optics. We see a lot of things like these robot dogs. Is a dog and the way a dog moves the best way to transport around? I don't know. What about these walking robots that are like humans? Are the legs the best way to get around? Shouldn't we have some sort of wheels and stuff like that? But no, a lot of these companies make these robots and such to look like human beings, and we are sucked in because of the seductive optics that gives us this idea that the robots, this AI, is more like a human. It appeals to our anthropomorphization of artificial intelligence. So seductive optics is AI can be wrapped in a package that tries to increase the perception of its significance, unrecognize the psychological impact of the Frankenstein complex and the uncanny valley. Yeah, human doing that. By the way, this is kind of interesting. Do you know that the country of Saudi Arabia, They were impressed by the robot Sophia that they granted her citizenship. So a robot is a citizen of Saudi Arabia. I make the comment that Homer Simpson was granted honorary citizenship in Ottawa, Canada. The difference is that the people that the Saudi Arabia didn't know that it was a joke. I think the people in Winnipeg, Canada, knew that it was a joke, and that indeed there were aspects which were indeed not well, for Homer Simpson isn't a real person, so they knew it was a joke, but the people in Saudi Arabia didn't. And then there's the half truths. Beware of those tricky headlines and claims that are almost true, but intended to deceive. We see this all the time where you go in with a half truth, but then you break it up. So this is a list of eight ways to do hype detection. And this, by the way, can apply not only to things written by AI, but uh, the not only things written by AI, but the fake images that we see in AI. Is it totally effective? No, it isn't totally effective, but it does indeed diminish your chances of being deceived. You know, in detection theory, there's two sorts of things. Some people call it type 1 error, type 2 error. I've heard it called false positives, false negatives. I always had to think about that too much. So I like the term detection probability and false alarm probability. So when you detect things, you want to make sure, when you detect truth, you want to make sure that you're very, very high on the detection threshold. But you don't want to accept things that are true, which are wrong. And when you do that, you get what I would call a false alarm. You accept things which are false, but you accept them as true. It turns out that any detector that you make, including yourself, has a trade-off between detection probability and false alarm probability. Oh, let me give you an example of a detection versus false alarm. There's software out there right now that detects cheating in ChatGPT. And if you look at that software, you think, oh, this is great because it claims to have like a 95% detection probability. That's fine. So if the person is cheated 95% of the time, that person will be caught. Um, and that's really good. But what they don't address is the false alarm probability. And the false alarm probability for the ChatGPT detectors, of which I'm aware, are very high. They're like 30 or 40%. Say they're 30%. That means that one of three of the people that are accused of cheating really aren't cheating. So you have to have a high detection probability and a low false alarm probability. And the two go hand in hand. As the detection probability increases, the false alarm probability is also going to increase. You can't get around it. There's an entire field of probability and statistics called detection theory, which teaches this sort of trade-off. Well, we go on. Um, we also have citation bluffing. This is something that I talked about with the Bat Boy. It says scientists claim that this is citation bluffing. There's no scientists that have occurred that, but you'll also see this in different places. I think the Chat GPT used to come out and they said give a reference, and they would totally make up the reference. You've seen that. That's an idea of citation bluffing. So they appealed to authority without actually citing or quoting the authority. There's small silo ignorance. I believe that most of the headlines that we see about AI belong in the National Enquirer, and the source of news and opinion always requires consideration. Access to the source, I consider the source. I think this is kind of obvious. I trust content more from the Wall Street Journal than from politically motivated sites like the Huffington Post or journalism sites like the National Enquirer. But even if the article appears on a site or a periodical that has earned a measure of trust, it's wise to assess the writer of the article and the ideology behind the article. The other thing is who benefits. We hear Sam Altman from OpenAI come out and say, well, ChatGPT is doing great things. Here's ChatGPT 5. It's gonna do all sorts of incredible things. Well, That's interesting. A person that's really good at that too is Elon Musk with Tesla. He used to come out with all sorts of hyperbolic claims about the self-driving capabilities of the Tesla cars, and he's lauding the accomplishments of Grok. And this is what these guys should do. They're head of companies, and they need to promote their companies. They need to make sure that these companies are looked at in the most positive point of view. And so they make these claims, and many of them just border on not being true. They're true enough to be true, but really don't border on being true. So that's the reason that I think that considering who benefits is really incredible. So with that, that's how you detect some of the hypes, at least some of the tools for detecting hype. Will you get 100% detection probability? No. Will you get 0% false alarm? No. But I think it will increase your detection probability in general and also lower your false alarm probability. So, the next thing I want to do is kind of a new topic is I want to address some of the people who've bought into the AI hype. And these are really, really smart people. But I want to share some of the quotes, and then I will share some other really smart people who disagree with these quotes. And I refer to these people as, if you will, AI Chicken Littles. You're familiar with the story about Chicken Little. He was hit on the head by a ceiling tile, and he went around screaming, "The sky is falling! The sky is falling!" So that's what AI Chicken Littles do. So let me go through some of them, and you're going to be surprised at some of them. Some of these are really, really smart people. One of them is Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil wrote a book called "The Singularity is Near." The singularity is when the AI achieves the same capabilities as a human being. And if that includes creativity and understanding, that isn't going to happen. If and so we can, I'll talk more about that in a second. Homo Deus is by Yuval Noah Harari, and both of these guys believe that AI is going to take over. Now, you're familiar with the evolutionary progress of Homo erectus to Homo sapien, and according to Harari, the next step is Homo Deus. Homo Deus means man God. And some of the Kurzweil, for example, believes that evolution has happened to a point biologically where it can't evolve anymore. So therefore, our job is to get into silicon, into AI, and advance and increase the artificial intelligence through silicon to do things to do things beyond the capabilities of what biological intelligence can do. Harari is the same sort of person. Now, Ray Kurzweil wrote his book about 20 years ago. The singularity is near. Guess what? In 20 years, it hasn't happened. He talks all about exponential increase in this, exponential increase in that. And I don't know if you know this, but there's nothing in technology or physically that can sustain continued exponential growth. We saw this in COVID, for example. The growth was exponential, but everybody noticed that the curve would flatten, right? That exponential growth doesn't increase. I think this is true for a lot of things that we consider. You've heard of Moore's Law, for example. It has to flatten out somewhere, and we don't know where it's going to flatten out, but it has to flatten out somewhere. And all of this exponential growth is indeed one of the things that he hangs his hat on, and the singularity is near. As I mentioned, he wrote this book 20 years ago. Well, guess what? It didn't happen. So guess what he did? Last year, he wrote a book called The Singularity is Nearer. In other words, it hasn't happened in 20 years, but you know what? We're really, really close this time. And maybe in 10 more years, he's going to say, you know what? It's just right around the corner. And notice this is delayed scrutiny. It says the singularity is nearer. This is a prophecy about the future. And when you do, I think Niels Bohr says prophecy and forecasting is dangerous, especially if it's about the future. And we've seen a lot of prophecies that simply don't come true. So this is Ray Kurzweil, and I think that both of these guys are uh, Yuval Noah Harari and Kurzweil are are not very smart people. I'm involved in a conference called COSM, and we had Ray Kurzweil speak at that conference. And he went through all his exponential increases and things like that. Although I think he's kind of backing off on some of his claims now that he sees the limitations of AI. And I was on a panel afterwards that kind of took him down, and he wasn't available to see that panel, but I wish he was. So anyway, the singularity is nearer 2006. The singularity is nearer when we merge with AI. By the way, both of these guys are secular atheists. Kurzweil was asked one time, "Do you believe in God?" He said, "No, not yet." And so he believes that AI is going to become our new God, if you will. So let's talk about some of the other people that are concerned. Bill Gates. I just had a conversation with George. He's one of the tech support people here at Baylor. How many have seen know George? Okay, okay. So some people, and he was talking about he's related in marriage to a family that was in the genesis of Bill Gates. And he says, you know what? Bill Gates was really not an entrepreneur with the status of an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs, who had wonderful, wonderful ideas. He said rather he was a person that took advantage of legal things. I wrote an article and I just looked it up to send it to George, an article I wrote about 4 years ago, the question whether Microsoft has ever done anything innovative. And I don't believe it has. I don't think you can put a finger on anything innovative that Microsoft has ever done. It bought the DOS operating system, which gave it its first big leg up. PowerPoint was purchased. Um, the Excel spreadsheet was a knockoff of Lotus 123. The Windows Explorer, which is now extinct, was a copy of Netscape, which was the most popular web browser at the time. And they went to court. And it turns out that Microsoft is just powerful in lawyers. When I went to work for Microsoft, you know what the first thing that I did some consulting for them. I went and you know what the first thing I did was I met with the lawyers. I met with the lawyers and I thought I would get into the technical stuff, but no, I had to meet with the lawyers because Bill Gates' father is an attorney. He's in Seattle. I think it's Preston Ellis and Gates. It's a big law firm. And so he's never done anything innovative. If you disagree with me and can point to anything innovative that Microsoft has ever done, I'd appreciate it. But you think about all of the things that they have done. It nothing has been really really innovative at all. So he's not in the same status in my mind as a creative person as Bill Gates, as I'm sorry, as Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. Both were innovators and pioneers, but Gates wasn't. He was in this, and he excelled because of his business skills and his legal connections. But then there's other guys which are really, really smarter, and I'm going to show you one of them. This is kind of surprising. This is the late Stephen Hawking. He says the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. It would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever increasing rate. Humans who would be are limited by so slow biological evolution couldn't compete and be superseded. Wow, this is kind of a dystopian view of where AI is going to go by a guy that was really, really smart. Um, in the year, I think it was 2020, if Stephen Hawking was alive, he would have gotten the Nobel Prize. He wasn't alive, but one of the guys that he worked with black holes with, Roger Penrose, was. And we'll see that Roger Penrose has a much different viewpoint about the limits of AI than Stephen Hawking did. You notice one of the things in Stephen Hawking's claim is that AI can be creative. Because if AI writes better AI that writes better AI, that means that the AI has to be creative, right? And indeed, we're going to make the argument that AI indeed is not creative, and we'll be very careful about defining what creativity is. So anyway, he's a smart guy, and this was his opinion. This was a really, really big deal. Then we get to one of the innovators. Mark my words, there's Elon Musk, of course. AI is far more dangerous than nukes. And with artificial intelligence, we're summoning the demon. And so I asked Grok, which is Elon Musk's company, to generate a picture of Elon Musk with a demon in the background. And this is what it gave me. So this is Elon Musk summoning the demon because he is indeed pursuing AI. And this guy is really smart. Now, George Gilder, I almost hesitate to say it, but George Gilder, one of the founders of Discovery Institute, Ronald Reagan's favorite author, said that Elon Musk is a brilliant entrepreneur, but he's kind of a retarded thinker. And there's kind of evidence of that. Certainly he's coming from a materialistic point of view. And uh, he doesn't have the best decisions, for example, in his marital situation. He at one time believed that we were all simulations. Did you know that? That's one of the theories behind consciousness, that we're all simulations by a higher being. But man, I tell you, everything Elon Musk does is classy. We have, was it Sky? It's not Skylink. Skylink was from the Terminator. Starlink, I think it was. Is that Elon Musk's company, Starlink? And so I have a place in the sticks in West Virginia. Shoot, we couldn't even get cell coverage, and we got Starlink out there, and it's ruined our situation because we go out to this house back in the sticks in West Virginia, and it used to be we couldn't get on our cell phones, and we all sit around and talked with each other and play games and stuff like that. Now we go down there because we have Starlink. It's kind of ruined. We're all on our cell phones and things of that sort. But he made that possible for things back in the sticks in my home in my house in West Virginia. The other thing he does, well, not only Starlink, but Tesla. My goodness, have you ridden in some of these self-driving taxis that exist in places like Austin and San Francisco? I have not ridden in one. My son rode in one, and he said it was an incredible experience riding into this self-driving taxi. And he said it was run by Uber, which kind of surprised me. That you go to Uber and they say, "Would you like a self-driving taxi?" And you have the ability to say yes or no. But what he's done there is just classy. The Starlink technology is astonishing and was so simple to set up. You set up the antenna, and I set it up on my back porch. I also have it here in Waco. I live in McGregor, suburb of Waco, but I set it up on my back porch, and you push a button, and there's this flat antenna that goes. Zzz, zzz, zzz. It actually moves to find the best location in the sky. I mean, my goodness, what technology that is. And then I have an app on my phone that says how it's doing and things of that sort. So I tell you, everything that Elon Musk's touches business wise is classic. He's a classy guy. Now, this hype and this idea about AI goes back, and we talked about Claude Shannon. He was one of the participants of the 1956 original. By the way, did you notice that my hand is risen? I don't know if you see that, but when you put your hand up, the people in the do Zoom say, "Okay, I think he wants to ask a question," and they put this hand up. Yeah, try it on yours. Put your hand up and see if you want to ask a question. Okay, you could have fun with that. Anyway, Claude Shannon, he was a big believer in AI. Really interesting guy. Uh, if you want to read a fascinating story, Claude Shannon has done more for technology and affects your life more than Albert Einstein ever did. I mean, he was a great scientist and mathematician. And he said, I visualize a time when we will be to robots what dogs are to humans. So this is the idea that AI would achieve super intelligence. And then he said, I'm rooting for the machine. So I asked ChatGPT to write a picture of a dog that looked like Claude Shannon being walked by a robot. And this is what it gave me. So I don't know if that dog looks like Claude Shannon, but that's still kind of pretty cool. And we mentioned Nobel Prizes, and I mentioned that the Nobel Prize should have been won by Paul Werbos and Bernie Woodrow. But this is the guy who won it. And I looking back, I actually had interactions with him in my earlier days in AI, and he's never done anything singularly, which is which is contributing to AI. He's popularized a lot of things. He's made a lot of things available, but as far as coming up with innovation like Woodrow's Adeline or Paul Werbos's invention of Arabic propagation, these are singular accomplishments. And usually that's what you get a Nobel Prize from. And you get a Nobel Prize in physics. He won it in physics with a guy named Hopfield, which I've mentioned before. And neither one of them deserved the Nobel Prize. So it's political, I guess. But anyway, he came out and he says, I am worried that the overall consequence of this might be systems more intelligent than us and eventually take control. This again assumes the ability of AI to write better AI and generate systems which are indeed better than us. So, wow, that's interesting. I think that if you go to the CEOs of some of these big companies, you'll find a totally different opinion. And these are CEOs of companies. The CEO of Google says the future of AI is not about replacing humans; it's about augmenting human capabilities. Amen. AI is going to be a tool, and that tool is going to make life better for us. So that's the CEO of Google. The former CEO of IBM, Jenny Ramati, says AI will not replace humans, but I thought this was kind of cute. But those who use AI will replace those who don't. And I just wrote an article about the future of AI in education, and AI is out of the bottle. And I think that kids in high school and such are going to need to know how to use AI the same way the same way that they use word processors and spreadsheets. It's just going to be something which is required in order to exist in the workplace. And Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, is likewise. AI will enhance the way humans experience the world. Yes, certainly, I agree. I agree with that. So the business leaders have delved into AI and figured out, I think, the true future of artificial intelligence, and I basically agree with them. And then I love Emo Phillips. He's my favorite comedian. He says computers aren't intelligent; they only think they are. And if you have looked at ChatGPT and you have gotten a false output, you know that's not right. That response is not right. Um, Even though you know the response is not right, it sure sounds like ChatGPT is convinced that it is right, right? And so we have Emo Phillips here. He's a really weird guy, and if you want to get some great comedy, go on to YouTube. He has a lot of specials there. Here is kind of a viewpoint of AI. You notice that that there are limitations. By the way, this is a picture of a guy. He was demonstrating a new helmet that he had invented. I met a professor, only about 5 or 6 years ago, that was studying the woodpecker. And his idea was to look at the woodpecker and see, oh my gosh, this woodpecker bangs its head into wood at great force, and it must have the skull to allow it to do that. And so he was looking at the physiology of the woodpecker and trying to design football helmets to have the same sort of property. Well, this guy clearly many, many years ago had invented a football helmet. He was demonstrating that this football helmet was really good to wear by running up against a wall and banging his head against it. I love this picture. But here's the point: there are limitations of what people can do. This guy will never go through the wall, and these are there are walls that certain things, certain topics, certain areas will never go through, and these are established. And there's a chance in the quantum world that this guy could actually tunnel through the wall, right? You familiar with quantum tunneling? There's a very, very small chance that he could tunnel through the wall onto the other side, if you believe in that sort of thing. So let's talk about the limitations. We know that there's limitations in physics. We know that there's limitations in math. And we know that there's limitations in computer science, although the limitations in computer science are not always addressed. And I want to go through those very quickly. Just to review, for example, in mathematics, for example, these are walls that AI will never go through. You can't construct a square with the same area as a given circle using only a compass and a straight edge. You've heard this referred to as squaring the circle. You can't square the circle using a compass and a straight edge. The second one is trisecting an arbitrary angle with a compass and a straight edge. This is a hard mathematical truth. That's something that mathematics cannot do. They can't trisect an arbitrary angle with a compass and a straight edge. There's no closed form solution for solving quintet equations by radicals. We're all familiar with the quadratic formula, which lets you find the roots of a quadratic equation. That's also true for third and fourth order polynomials, but there is a proof that the quintet equation, where you go to the fifth power, has no closed form solution for solving the roots of that problem. Now, I found this interesting, but building a perfectly fair die with seven sides that everything comes up equally probable. We're all aware of dice, which have what, one, two, three, six sides, and you can roll it, and the probability of any one of the numbers coming up is the same as any other number. And then there was Kurt Gödel, and we're going to talk more about Kurt Gödel because he had a great impact on computer science and especially Alan Turing in creating a complete, consistent, and decidable system for all mathematics. It turns out that in the 1930s, there was a proposition put forward by Hilbert that believed that we could develop mathematics mathematically from a set of axioms, from a set of fundamental principles that could derive all of mathematics. And in fact, Whitehead and Russell actually came up with an attempt to do that. They came up with some axioms that they were going to try to prove all of mathematics with, and they wrote a book called Something Mathematica, and it was two volumes. And they went very carefully through these axioms, these basic assumptions, these postulates, and they began to develop this theory that you could do mathematics, and they were going to build it up into all of mathematics. And this was a great feat for them, and certainly a great goal. Well, Kurt Gödel came along, and by the way, I've been tasked to by not saying I've been criticized for not saying girdle right. I pronounce it like girdle, like the woman's undergarment, but I think it should be more like girdle. I don't know the umlaut O very well. So I'll try to say Gödel more better in the future. But anyway, Gödel came up with this idea that no, you couldn't do that. No matter what assumptions you have, there are going to be truths, and you can prove there are truths which you cannot prove by those axioms. And that really toppled mathematics. And Gregory Chaitin, one of the founders of algorithmic information, and I'll just touch on him in a minute. One of the most brilliant mathematical minds of the 20th century. He said that people are still looking into the consequences and meaning of Gödel's theorem. But this is something that you can't do. You can't prove all of mathematics through meta mathematics by going through axioms and developing things one by one. Okay, so these are walls that mathematics will never go through. How about walls that physics will never go through? Well, currently, and I think it's pretty well solid that you can't exceed the speed of light. Einstein said if you get close to the speed of light, that's kind of interesting because your mass increases. And if you go through the speed of light to an observer, you get infinite mass, and that's probably not good. And so all this stuff about Star Trek and where they go, what, warp three, which is three times the speed of light, that's total science fiction. Currently, you can't go back in time. Time is a forward marching dimension, and you can't go back in time. You can go forward in time. This was the Einstein twin paradox, where if you have twin brothers and one of them goes out in space and goes near the speed of light and then comes back, he will not have aged at all, but his brother on Earth will be an old man. So, in that sense, he's going forward in time. But once you go forward in time, you can't come back. So, that's kind of interesting. Perpetual motion machines. There is no free lunch. The U.S. Patent Office has a policy that if anybody applies for a patent that claims to have a perpetual motion machine, which is a machine that generates energy, more energy than it intakes, they don't even consider it because it's physically impossible. Violating causality, you have to have an effect. You have to have a cause before an effect. And then there's the quantum mechanical stuff of exactly knowing the position and momentum of of a particle at the same time. That's the Heisenberg principle. So you can't know them exactly. These are hard walls AI will never, hard walls that physics will never go through. Decreasing entropy in a closed system. Entropy always increases. So no, you can't do that. So I think these are pretty well established walls that physics will never go through. However, I would caution that with physics, you never say never. The reason you never say never is because, well, you don't know what happens. Stephen Hawking, who I respect in a lot of ways, said that nothing in physics is ever proved. You just accumulate You just accumulate evidence. And I think for all of these, the evidence is in. The evidence is so overwhelming that it's hard to refute it. But again, you never say never. Maybe some of these things will be shown not to be true. But right now, these are walls that physics will never go through. So this is mathematics. This is physics. What about computer science? Well, computers will never solve the halting problem. If you haven't heard of the halting problem, we'll go through it. It's a problem that AI will, or that computers will never solve. And indeed, there's lots of problems, provably, that that computers will never solve. There is no universal compressor that always shrinks every file. We're all familiar with JPEG compression and PNG compression and zip files where you compress a file. And then there's a question, if you have a certain operating system, what's the most that you can compress a file? And it turns out that's not algorithmic. You cannot determine how much you can shrink a file. That's non-algorithmic, can't be computed, and that's proved mathematically. Same thing for the halting problem. Generating true random numbers. Computers can't generate random numbers. They generate something called pseudo-random numbers. And the only thing random about them is the seed that you have in generating a sequence of random numbers. And that seed comes external to the software. They usually do things like look at a quantum collapse, or they go out and they look at the clock, which goes around really, really fast, and they grab the few least significant uh, digits, and they use that as the seed for one time for generating all these pseudo-random numbers. But you could not generate randomness using a computer. You can't compute busy beaver numbers. We're not going to talk about that, but I offer a course in information theory, and we'll talk about busy beaver numbers here. These are numbers which are so big that they will never be computed, at least from at higher levels. And in fact, they're basically non-computable. We know they exist, but they're non-computable. And anything which is non-algorithmic, if you can't have an algorithm to do something, if you can't have an algorithm to perform an operation like the halting problem, then that isn't going to happen. So in information theory, uh, the algorithmic information theory is some of the most fascinating, mind-blowing stuff I've ever seen. And I think busy beaver numbers are an example of that. And we do talk about we talk about non-computability a lot. And I'll talk about that just in a minute here. Okay, we talk about all these chicken littles, and we talked about Stephen Hawking working together with a guy named Roger Penrose on the founding of the black holes. Penrose in 2020 won the Nobel Prize in Physics. This was incredibly deserved because he worked with Stephen Hawking on the founding of the theory of black holes. Now, Hawking did not win the Nobel Prize along with Penrose because you have to be alive in order to get the Nobel Prize, and Hawking had passed on. And I was greatly influenced by Roger Penrose. You can see a picture of him here in the lower left, by a book called The Emperor's New Mind. If you're interested and you're nerdy and you want to find out the limitations of computers, get Penrose's book, The Emperor's New Mind, but be prepared. There's lots of math, lots of fascinating math in there, which he uses to back the idea that there are things which computers will never do. And computers can only create within their experience. They cannot create beyond their foundational experience. And I read this book, and it so impressed me that it motivated me to write Non-Computable You, which was an explanation of some of Penrose's ideas and ideas of others and mine that could be explained in a non-mathematical fashion. Penrose goes deep into the math in his book, but it is just it was really in my top 10 books that have influenced me in my life. The Emperor's New Mind by Roger Penrose, just an incredible genius. So here are the claims that I am going to make in the remainder of this high level lecture. Number one is computers will never be creative, and will define a criteria by which creativity can be measured. They will never understand. We're going to give an example of understanding and why computers never understand through something called Searle's Chinese room, an astonishing result. They will never be sentient and experience qualia. Qualia is a word that I learned, and that's what you experience when you feel pain or bite into a lemon or something like that. I don't have a mathematical background, mathematical example of this, but I'm going to appeal to kind of your common sense. They will never achieve anything like the singularity, and they will always be hyped. And why is that? What is Roger Penrose's basic idea that's going to keep AI from being creative or understanding? And here it is, algorithms. Now, we're all familiar with algorithms because we're all nerds and we've written computer codes. All computer codes are algorithms. And that's really good and that's really fun. Um, but algorithms are things which can be computed by a computer. And we've already seen through the limits of mathematics, there are things which algorithms can't do. And this begs the question, are there things which humans do which are non-algorithmic? And I think the answer is yes. I don't think they can be captured by an algorithm. And we'll make the case for that also. So I usually give a talk similar to this to more secular audiences, and I have to explain what I mean by algorithm, so bear with me. An algorithm is a set of rules to be followed in problem solving. A shampoo bottle says wet hair, apply shampoo, lather, rinse, repeat. That's an algorithm. It's a step-by-step procedure. Of course, looking at this, there's a problem with it. Can anybody see the problem with this set of instructions?
When does it end?
And when does it end, Riley? You're exactly right. This thing will repeat forever. It doesn't say repeat once, it says repeat. And if you were to apply this algorithm uh, by a computer, it would be a program that looped. And we're going to talk about programs that loop. And we're going to talk about programs that actually don't loop. If you put repeat once, it doesn't loop. It's just boom, it executes it and it stops. I was surprised. I go to Jack in the Box every once in a while. I like their ultimate cheeseburger because it's full of good protein and cheese and well, there's carbs in the bun, but it's not bad. But I got a soft drink there, and they had a similar set of instructions on the Jack in the Box Jack in the Box uh, paper cup. It says order, eat, earn, repeat. Now, what's interesting there is there they meant to repeat, didn't they? They meant to repeat forever, unlike the shampoo bottle. So, same algorithm with the idea that it loops and it loops forever. Another example, real quick, is we're so used to algorithms, it's hard to think of things which are non-algorithmic. The best vanilla cake recipe, all recipes are algorithms. You have a step-by-step procedure to follow in order to bake a cake. That's one of the things. If you go to Google Maps, which I couldn't exist without, it's a set of rules to be followed with problem-solving operations that get you from point A to point B. You go to a point A and say, go to the Farrell Center, turn right on LaSalle, go 2.3 miles to the little roundabout, and et cetera, et cetera. So it gives you a set of instructions to follow. And that certainly is an algorithm. And I love Google Maps. And of course, even computer pages are follow algorithms. I'm director of the Bradley Center for Natural and Artificial Intelligence. This is our webpage, mindmatters.ai, and it backs a lot. We have a lot of people that are like thinking to me, and they publish articles about this and other things. But even this has a an algorithm associated with it. If you go to any web page, you right click and you say show source, it'll give you basically the algorithm, the computer program that the web page is following. So everything associated with the computer is algorithmic. In fact, AI is algorithmic. We have, for example, error back propagation. Training is algorithmic. It's a step-by-step procedure to train an artificial neural network. So all of the AI, the Chat GPT, everything that uses Paul Werbos's error back propagation algorithm is doing so in accordance to an algorithm. So this is good. We wrote a book. I wrote a book with Russell Reed. This is a long time ago called Neural Smithing. I'm very proud, and it goes through all of the mathematics of training and error back propagation. It was published by MIT Press, And I'm very proud of the book, even though it's old, it still gets referenced a lot. I think one of the reasons that it gets referenced a lot is because of the name, right? Neural smithing. If you put neural smithing in a Google search, you go directly to my book because nobody else uses neural smithing. And I think that's one of the reasons. And second, I'm pretty proud of it. It's even though it's decades old, it's still referenced a lot in the literature as kind of a source explaining error propagation. Um, so yeah, so it explains, if you will, all of the algorithms associated with error propagation and training. So even artificial intelligence is generated by AI. So Alan Turing was the guy that he's the father of modern computer science. He's most famous for solving the Enigma code in World War II. Some of you have saw his picture, his biopic, where he helped solve the Enigma problem. Enigma was a code which was used by the Nazis in World War II to communicate. And we received their signals all the time, but they were encoded. And so at Benchley Park in England, they put together a team of brains, including Alan Turing, and they said, break this code. And the code changed every day. In fact, the key that you use to unlock it, the password, if you will, changed every day. So they were up against a problem. And Turing famously did solve this. And that's what he's most famous for. And he was played in the movie by Benedict Cumberbatch. And he's a great actor. He plays Doctor Strange in the Marvel universe. But Benedict Cumberbatch is really a great actor, and he represented Alan Turing in this machine. But I tell you what, Alan Turing should be more noted for as one of the greatest mathematicians in the 20th century, is he should be noted for his work on computers. He was the father of modern computing because in the 1930s, he actually proposed the first, if you will, Turing machine, which is a machine that is incredible. And even today, super duper computers, if you have a super duper computer, you can perform that same operation on Turing's original machine that he published back in the 1930s. It would take a million times as long in order to publish it. But but nevertheless, you can do it on the original Turing machine, and so that's kind of nice. So he did a something, and he proved that there was something that could not be done by computers, and this was referred to as the Turing halting problem. It's taught by most computer science majors. Given an arbitrary computer program P and input I, the program halt will output a one if the program eventually stops, or a zero if it ran forever. So, in other words, the idea was taking a computer program and having another program look at it and say, is this going to run forever, like the shampoo bottle? Okay. Or is it going to halt, which is the shampoo bottle with the final result repeat once? And so there's obviously the case of the shampoo bottle where we can look at it and we can say, that halts or that doesn't halt. But he wanted to look at a computer program that was able to look at any computer program and decide whether it halted or didn't halt. So this is an interesting problem, and Turing showed that this problem was non-algorithmic. A halting program cannot be written. The halting oracle, which would be the software that decided whether a computer program could be halt or not, is simply impossible. And this was proven by Turing, not conjecture, not hand waving, but mathematical proof. And here's one of the ways of doing. Here's the Turing halting machine. The idea is that you give this any computer program, and the program says we will halt or we will run forever. This is really astonishing stuff, and the philosophical implications are really profound. Let me go through those. Those are very interesting. There was a generalization of Turing's halting problem by Rice, and he said all non-trivial semantic properties of programs are undecidable. Okay, how do you translate that? Well, it turns out, given an arbitrary program, you could not write another program to decide whether that program will ever print the number three. Wow. not halt or don't halt, but print the number three. You can do that for certain programs or not, but you can't write a general program to determine whether no other program will print the number three. And that's what they mean by all non-trivial semantic properties of programs. That would be like printing the number three. So there's nothing that you can tell about a computer program in general for all computer programs. The profound implication of this is for so-called determinism. Uh, Determinism doesn't imply knowability. This is gets a little bit philosophical, but I think is fun. I think you'll like this. There was a guy in Laplace. Every electrical engineer has heard of Laplace, right? The Laplacian in vector calculus, Laplace transforms, Laplacian probability density functions. He is really an accomplished guy, and he believed in determinism. And determinism says basically if we knew the position and velocity of every particle in the world, we could forecast the future. Well, according to Rice's theorem, that isn't necessarily true because we can know the position and velocity and all this other stuff of every particle in the universe and not be able to forecast the future because of Rice's theorem. We would not know if something specifically happened in the future because it's non-algorithmic. You can't do it. So therefore, that's the reason that I say determinism does not imply knowability. So you have a computer program, boom, it's totally deterministic, right? It doesn't mean that you know what that computer program will do. You don't know if it'll halt. You don't know if it'll print the number three. And this, by the way, is for all programs. There's clearly programs where you do know if it would halt, and it does print out a number three. But determinism does not imply knowability. I think that this is an interesting flaw in Laplace's original idea of determinism. By the way, with the advent of quantum mechanics, we know that, well, the future, in some sense, is probabilistic, right? It's probabilistic in the sense that we have these quantum wave functions. We don't know how they're going to collapse and things of that sort. But I think you could generalize Laplace's idea. If we know all of the wave functions in the universe, we could probabilistically forecast the future in some sense. So I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade and beyond my expertise. But with Laplace's idea of determinism, I think Rice's theorem says determinism does not imply knowability. Computer programs are deterministic, but we don't know if they'll halt, they'll print the number three, etc. So let's talk about foundations of proving non-computability. I ask I think this was ChatGPT to draw a picture of Alan Turing drop kicking a computer over a chessboard. And the reason I did this is another Emo Phillips joke. I love Emo Phillips. He says, a computer once beat me at chess, but it was no match for me at kickboxing. So that's something a computer can't do. At least my laptop can't do it. A computer once beat me at chess, but it was no match for me in kickboxing. So let's talk about this. Fundamentals are done by something called meta-analysis. Now, meta-analysis is applying a concept or a mathematics to itself. Gödel showed indeed this was the case when he proved his incompleteness theorem. And Turing did this also. Now, Gödel's original work was not that understandable, but Turing's was. And so there is a computer limitation, and a lot of this is actually applying a concept to itself. And I call it the reductio ad absurdum smackdown. You've seen this used in math where you make an assumption, you get a contradiction, and you say, well, my assumption can't be right. This is the idea of a reductio ad absurdum smackdown. So I like to generalize this. There's all sorts of illusions. You see in the upper left here, there's a picture of people going up and downstairs, and the upstairs continue and keep going up, but they repeat themselves. This is an optical illusion. And you can see this on the right too. On the right, if you go clockwise, you're always going upstairs, right? But of course, you can't always be going upstairs. It's an optical illusion. And next to that is what Mad Magazine called the three-pronged Paiute or something like that. It's an optical illusion. That thing does not exist. It's just fun to look at. So there's also and I don't think I put Do you hear that? Do you hear any audio from that? Okay, I'll have to play it next time because when I generate when I start Zoom, I have to do it for show listening to audio. This is something called the Rosset Glissando, and it is a audio illusion. And what it is, it's a sound that always sounds like it's keeping on going up. It's a sound that goes, doo. But the funny part is it sounds like it keeps going up, but it doesn't go up. But it's a audio illusion because it sounds like it's continually going higher in pitch. But clearly, if you went higher in pitch, you'd soon get out of the audio range of the human ear. But this thing doesn't work that way. This has been used in a number of movies. I think Dunkirk was one. I think the Mario Brothers was another one, where they had the Mario Brothers climbing steps, and these steps never ended. So it's kind of like that. And some of these things were very nicely captured in a book called Gödel, Escher, and Bach. And it's an okay book, but it's the idea of these different types of illusions. We have Gödel, who did mathematical sort of inconsistencies, Escher, who did optical illusions, and we have Bach, and apparently in some of Bach's work, we have this idea of things continually existing. So that's um, that's the situation here. Let me give you some illustrations of meta-analysis. In Titus 1.12b, this is a Baptist university, so I can talk about a Bible. There's a Cretan, and Paul says the Cretans are always liars. And you can look this up. This is in Titus 1:12b. And so here we have a Cretan. Now, suppose that we took this a little bit further. Well, let me give you the background of it. This was actually written by a guy. It comes from a Cretan poet and philosopher named Epimenides. I don't know how to say that. Epimenides of Crete, who lived around the 6th century BC. Now, you notice he was from Crete, so he was a Cretan. And so he said, all Cretans are liars. Well, this is interesting. What if we went a step further and he said, not only all Cretans are liars, but the Cretans said, everything I say is a lie. Everything I say is a lie. Now, that's well and good until you apply meta-analysis and apply this idea to itself. And this is the foundation for a lot of the great proofs in computer science, a lot of the great proofs that I'm aware of. Um, so if everything he says is a lie, then he just lied to you. And if he just lied to you, he told you the truth. But if he told you the truth, he just lied to you. But if he just lied to you, he's telling the truth. So around and around you go in what is called a strange loop, and it just keeps on going, and it goes forever and ever. So this is a logical illusion. This idea, all Cretans are liars, is a statement which has no foundation in reality and can be rejected as useful at all. Now, this this is a great. I write a column for Mind Matters News where I give puzzles every week, every Monday. We call them Monday Microsofties. So we meet two guys in the woods, and I posture it in the idea of Paul going to Corinth. So Paul goes to Corinth, and they come to a fork in the road, and he's with Timothy, and there's these two guys there. They're twin brothers, and Timothy says, "Look, I know about these guys. One of them always lies. The other one always tells the truth." And they wanted to find out the right way to get to Corinth, but they couldn't tell the difference between the guys. So one guy, the guy on the left, suppose the guy on the left was the one that never lied. He always told the truth. He held up the sign. He said, "I never lie." Well, he's telling the truth because he never lies, right? The guy on the right, on the other hand, says, "I never lie." Well, if he's a liar, if he always tells a lie, then if he never tells a lie, then he just lied, right? So both of the signs which are held up demonstrate that indeed they're responding in accordance to their character. The guy on the left says I never lie, and he never lies. The guy on the right always lies. So when he says I never lie, he's lying. So this is the problem that you have, and Timothy and Paul have to find out the right way to get to Corinth. So one is Epimenides, the liar. Oh, I did it, Epimenides. Yay, proud of myself. And his twin brother, Honest Thomas, who always tells the truth. And so what you get the following option. You can ask one of these people, and you don't know which one it is, the right road. You want to determine the right road to get to Corinth. And this is application of meta-analysis, if you will. And it's kind of an extension of the liar's paradox or the Cretan paradox. And so, is there one question where you could ask either brother and you would get the information needed to choose the right road? Did you get the puzzle? And it's how many? Some people have you seen this before? Okay, Riley has. Okay, and I suppose some other ones have. So you said, if I ask your brother which road leads to Corinth, what would he say? Uh, wow. Okay, if you ask the guy that always told the truth, he would say, well, my brother lies. He would tell you the wrong road. He would tell you this road. And the guy that lies knows that his brother tells the truth, so his brother would tell him the correct road, but this guy always lies, so he would also point to the wrong road. And so this question leads to both of them identifying the wrong road. And I think it's an incredibly interesting puzzle, or a resolution to a very interesting problem. So immediately after they asked this question, if I ask your brother which road leads to Corinth, what would he say? Both of them, according to whether they always tell the truth or always lie, would point to the wrong road, and and so they would know that to take the other road. Okay, I think that right now we're probably out of time, so thank you for your attention, and I'm still going to be working on my computer and getting it right, and hopefully we'll be able to do some good things in the future. So let me ask, is there any questions or comments that anybody wants to make before we stop? Okay, I've been very clear or very obfuscating, either one. Okay, well, thank you very much, and take care. Till we meet again next Tuesday, be of good cheer.